Samuel Carter had always been a man who worked from sunrise to sunset, a rancher who believed that hard work and steady hands could solve most problems. For years, that belief carried him through droughts, long winters, and the loss of cattle. But after his wife passed away and he was left to raise their son Daniel alone, he learned that there were challenges a man could not face with strength alone. Some burdens touched the heart more than the land ever could. Every morning, Samuel rose before the light touched the hills, his boots hitting the wooden floor with a heaviness he had grown used to. The ranch needed him. Animals had to be fed, fences repaired, and workers supervised, but before anything else, he always checked on his son. Daniel slept in a small room next to his, and Samuel often paused by the door, listening to the boy's soft breathing. Some days, he whispered a quiet prayer that his son would have a better morning than the day before. Daniel had once been a lively child who ran across the open fields and climbed every fence he was told not to. But a sudden illness years earlier had changed everything. Though he recovered from the fever, his legs never regained their full strength. Now, at just 10 years old, Daniel needed crutches to move around, and even short distances tired him. He often felt frustrated that his body would not obey him the way it used to. Samuel tried his best every day, lifting Daniel into his chair, helping him dress, preparing meals when the ranch cook was busy, and giving him lessons in reading and numbers. But the truth was simple and painful. Samuel could not be everywhere at once. Ranch work demanded hours of labor, and Daniel needed more care and attention than Samuel alone could give. It was after many long, exhausting months that Samuel first considered seeking a mail-order bride. The idea came not from his own mind, but from an older ranch hand named Tom, who had noticed the dark circles under Samuel's eyes and the way his shoulders seemed to slump more each week. "You're trying to be 10 men at once," Tom had told him gently. "No one can raise a child alone and keep a ranch running without help. Maybe it's time you had someone here who can look after the boy when you're out on the land." Samuel resisted the idea at first. He felt it was unfair to invite a stranger into his home, especially when he could not promise an easy life or much comfort. But every time he returned from the fields and found Daniel sitting alone, struggling to reach something or waiting for his father to help him, the guilt grew heavier. He wanted his son to have more than just survival. He wanted Daniel to feel cared for, supported, and never a burden. Eventually, Samuel wrote a simple advertisement. He did not try to make his life or his home sound grand. He told the truth. He was a widower with a young son who needed extra care. He ran a quiet ranch, and he hoped to find a kind woman who wished to build a family. He mailed it in to a newspaper that printed listings for women seeking husbands in the West. The first few replies gave him hope. Some women spoke kindly of wanting a stable home. Others said they were eager to start fresh. For a brief time, Samuel thought his problem was finally going to be solved. But that hope faded quickly. As soon as he explained Daniel's condition, the letters stopped coming. Some women thanked him politely for his honesty and declined. Others simply never replied again. A few made promises to visit but changed their minds later. Week after week, disappointment became familiar. Daniel heard things too. Even though Samuel tried to hide the truth, children could feel when something was wrong. "Is it because of me?" Daniel asked one night, looking small and uncertain in his bed. "Do they not come? Because of my legs?" The question pierced Samuel's heart deeper than anything he had ever faced. Kneeling beside his son, he put his hands on Daniel's shoulders and said, "You are not the reason anyone leaves. You are the best part of this home." But inside, he feared Daniel's words held some truth. It hurt him to imagine that people judged his son without ever meeting him. It hurt even more that Daniel had noticed. Still, Samuel kept trying. He sent more letters. He spoke honestly each time, refusing to hide his son's disabilities. He believed that any woman who joined their family needed to accept Daniel fully, without hesitation or regret. But honesty came with a cost. No one wanted to take on the responsibility of caring for a child who struggled with daily tasks. The ranch hands helped where they could. Some kept an eye on Daniel during the busiest days, letting him sit nearby while they worked or telling him stories to keep him company. But they were not family. They could not give him the gentle kind of care a mother's presence brought into a home. As months passed, the ranch itself began to show signs of neglect. Small tasks that Samuel used to keep up with became harder to manage. Tools went unrepaired longer. Animals needed closer attention than he could give, and new workers turned down jobs when they saw how overwhelmed the ranch owner already was. Samuel rarely complained, but his weariness showed. At night, he sat by the small kitchen table, with papers spread before him, lists of supplies, bills to pay, and letters he hoped to send. Daniel often came to sit beside him, doing quiet drawings or reading aloud in a soft voice. They were a small family, holding each other together the best they could. One cold morning, after receiving yet another letter from a woman who politely declined to continue writing, Samuel folded the paper and set it aside. He stared out the window at the winter sky, feeling the weight of loneliness settle heavier than usual. He wondered if maybe this was simply how life would be, just the two of them, struggling but getting by. But deep inside, a fear lingered. What would happen when Daniel grew older and needed more support? What would happen if Samuel became too tired, too sick, or too worn to care for him properly? He did not want to fail his son. He could not let that happen. So he wrote a new letter that night. Not to any particular woman, but as another advertisement for the newspaper. This time, he chose his words carefully. He made them simple, plain, and full of truth. He wrote about his son's courage and cleverness, about the small joys on the ranch, about the quiet evenings filled with peace. He did not promise comfort or wealth. He promised honesty and a place where a woman could belong if she was willing to walk a hard road with them. After mailing it, Samuel returned home and sat by Daniel's bedside for a long time. The boy slept peacefully, unaware of how deeply his father wished to give him a better future. For a long while, Samuel believed the world had little kindness left for a rancher with a disabled son. He felt invisible, forgotten, and tired in a way that went beyond physical work. But life often brings help when people least expect it, and Samuel had no way of knowing that far from the ranch, a woman named Clara Hayes would soon read his advertisement and feel something stir inside her heart. And unlike the others, she would not turn away. She would see his honesty as something rare. She would see his son not as a burden, but as a child who needed love. And she would be the first person willing to write back, not out of pity, but because she understood what loss felt like and what hope could mean. Clara Hayes had once believed her life would always remain warm and steady. She had dreamed of a quiet home, a loving husband, and the sound of children, filling the rooms with laughter. For a while, she had all of that. But life has a way of changing without warning, and Clara's world shifted in ways she never expected. Her husband, Nathan, had been a gentle man who worked at a small workshop in town. He was the kind of person who always brought home little surprises, flowers from the market, a sweet treat, or a new story to tell. Clara loved the way he smiled and the way he held their baby daughter, Lila, as if the whole world rested in that tiny bundle. But one autumn, an illness passed through the town, and many families suffered. Clara did everything she could to care for her husband and child, hoping they would get better soon. She stayed awake through long nights, whispered comforting words, and prayed for their health to return. But sometimes prayers do not change what is already happening. When the doctor visited, he looked worried and quiet. Clara tried to be strong, even when her hands shook. She wrapped her daughter in blankets, held her close, and stayed by Nathan's bedside. She hoped for a miracle, but none came. Within a short time, first her daughter, and then her husband, passed away, leaving Clara with an empty home and a heart full of sorrow. She walked through the small house in silence for days after. The crib was still in the corner, the rocking chair still beside the window, and Nathan's coat still hung on its hook. Everything felt untouched, as if the world had paused. But outside her walls, life kept moving forward, and her problems grew each day. Bills began to pile up. Nathan had not left much savings, and Clara's small sewing work could not cover everything. The landlord, though not unkind, reminded her that rent was due soon. Clara tried to stretch every coin she had, selling small belongings, doing extra sewing, and even taking on washing for neighbors. But it was never enough. Friends visited to offer sympathy, but they had families of their own to care for. Clara did not blame them. She understood that kindness had limits when people struggled themselves. One cold morning, she sat at her kitchen table with a letter from the landlord saying she needed to move out if she could not pay soon. The house felt too quiet, too large now that she was the only one in it. She rested her face in her hands and felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. She had no family left to turn to, no savings, and no clear future. For days, she tried to think of a way to survive. She considered working in a shop, but the town already had more workers than jobs. She thought about moving to another town, but without money, she had no way to travel. Her life felt like it was shrinking around her. Then, one afternoon, while walking through the market, she passed a small wooden stand that sold newspapers. A gentle breeze flipped the pages of one, and a section caught her eye: advertisements for mail-order marriages in the West. She had heard of such arrangements before. Some women sought new beginnings through them, while others simply hoped for a stable home. She had never imagined she would be one of them. But desperation sometimes brings people to choices they never expected to make. Clara hesitated at first. The idea of marrying a stranger felt frightening. What if he was unkind? What if the place he lived in was unsafe? She thought of all the reasons she should walk away. But then she thought of her empty home, the bills on the table, and the loneliness that wrapped around her every evening. She thought of how she had nothing left to protect except herself, and even that was slipping through her fingers. When she bought a newspaper and brought it home, she read through many advertisements. Some men asked for wives who could help with cooking. Others wanted someone educated. And some seemed to desire more house help than companionship. Clara read each one carefully, her heart heavy with uncertainty. Then she came upon one that made her pause. A widowed rancher named Samuel Carter was looking for a kind woman willing to help care for his young son who had difficulty walking. He wrote honestly, more honestly than anyone else she had seen. He did not promise large earnings or an easy life. He did not describe his ranch as grand or beautiful. Instead, he spoke of quiet days, steady work, and the hope for a motherly presence for his child. What touched her most was the way he described his son. He did not hide the boy's challenges. He wrote about Daniel's strength, his gentle nature, and the courage he showed every day. It was clear he loved his child deeply and wished for someone who could offer warmth and care. Clara read that advertisement several times. Something in it felt different from the others, less about duty and more about family. She understood loss, and she understood the longing for comfort. She knew what it meant to want a home that felt safe. Still, she hesitated before writing. She asked herself whether she was ready to begin again, whether she had anything left to offer another family. She wondered if it was fair to join a household when her heart was still healing. But when she looked around her small home, filled with fading memories and empty rooms, she knew she could not stay there forever. She needed to move forward. She needed a place to belong again. That evening, Clara lit a small lamp, sat at her table, and picked up a pencil. The paper, before she remained blank for several minutes as she tried to gather her thoughts. Finally, she began to write. Her letter was simple and honest. She told Samuel about her past, not every painful detail, but enough to explain why she sought a new beginning. She wrote about her late husband and daughter, and she expressed her desire to be useful in a home that needed care. She did not pretend to have special skills, but she assured him she knew how to work hard, cook, sew, and care for others. Most importantly, she wrote about Daniel. She said she felt compassion for a child who faced daily challenges. She did not see him as a burden, but as a young boy who deserved kindness and support. She promised that if Samuel chose her, she would treat his son with patience and respect. When she finished the letter, she sealed it with a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked to the post office the next morning. Mailing the letter felt like placing her future into the hands of fate. Once it left her grasp, there was no turning back. Days passed slowly. Clara tried not to think about the letter, but every morning, she found herself waiting for the mail carrier, hoping for a reply. She wondered if Samuel would choose someone else, or if he might decide she was not the right person for the role. Then, one quiet evening, just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, a small envelope arrived addressed to her. She opened it with careful hands. As she read Samuel's words, gentle, grateful, and welcoming, her heart filled with something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. He thanked her for writing. He said he admired her courage and honesty, and he invited her to join his family, if she truly wished to come. Clara sat for a long time with that letter in her hands, knowing her life was about to change again. This time, she hoped, it would lead her toward healing, purpose, and perhaps even love. She began preparing for her journey west, not knowing what she would find at the ranch, but carrying with her a quiet strength that had grown through loss and survival. She did not know Samuel yet. She did not know Daniel yet. But she already felt a small spark, the beginning of something new. The day Clara arrived at the ranch was bright and warm, with the sun spreading soft light across the open land. The wagon that carried her slowed as it approached the wide entrance, and Clara felt her heart beating faster. She gripped her small suitcase a little tighter. After weeks of travel, this was the moment she would finally meet the man who had written kind words to her and the child who needed a gentle hand. She whispered to herself to stay calm, even though she felt nervous in a way she hadn't felt in years. Samuel stood near the porch when the wagon came into view. He wiped his hands on his work pants and straightened his shoulders. He had imagined this moment many times since receiving Clara's letter. He wondered what she would be like, how she would speak, how she would react to the ranch, and most importantly, how she would see Daniel. But he reminded himself not to expect too much. Life had taught him to be cautious with hope. When the wagon stopped, Clara stepped down carefully. She wore a simple dress, faded from travel but clean, and her hair was neatly tied back. For a moment, she and Samuel simply looked at each other. Neither expected perfection, but something calm and warm passed between them. A quiet recognition that both had seen difficult times and still chose to move forward. "Mrs. Hayes," Samuel said gently, though his voice held a note of nerves. "Clara," she replied kindly. "And I'm Samuel," he said with a small, relieved smile. For a few seconds, they stood in an awkward silence, unsure how to begin. Clara finally took a small breath and said, "Thank you for welcoming me." Her voice was soft but steady. Samuel nodded. "Thank you for coming. Truly. Truly." Clara then looked past him toward the house. "And your son?" Samuel glanced toward the porch. "He's nearby." He hesitated, not wanting to rush things. "He's a bit shy with new people." Clara smiled gently, understanding more than Samuel expected. "That's all right. I don't mind taking things slowly." Samuel appreciated her softness. He picked up her suitcase to carry it inside. But before either of them could step toward the door, a small voice spoke. "I'm here," Daniel said. Clara turned to see a boy standing halfway behind the porch pillar, his crutches tucked neatly under his arms. He watched her with wide, cautious eyes, as if waiting to see whether she would smile or frown at the sight of him. Clara's face softened instantly. She walked toward him, slowly so she wouldn't scare him. When she was close enough, she bent a little, so her eyes were level with his. "Hello, Daniel," she said gently. "I'm very happy to meet you." Daniel didn't respond at first. He only stared, studying her face as if trying to decide whether she meant her words. Most adults who met him either felt sorry for him or didn't know how to act around him. Clara didn't show either reaction, which confused him in a quiet way. Finally, he gave a tiny nod. "Hello," he whispered. Clara didn't push the moment. She simply gave him a warm smile before standing again. Samuel felt a small wave of relief. That first meeting could have gone much worse. Inside the house, things were calm but a little unsteady. Clara noticed that the home had a good structure, solid walls, wide rooms, and sunlight streaming in, but it also carried signs of a man doing his best with too many responsibilities. A few dishes sat unwashed in the sink. Daniel's books were stacked unevenly on the table. A quilt hung on a chair, instead of folded away. None of it bothered her. It only made her more certain the home needed a woman's gentle touch. Samuel seemed embarrassed as he noticed his own half-finished chores. "I'm sorry for the mess. I tried to make things ready, but the ranch has been busy." Clara shook her head. "There's nothing to be sorry for. Life isn't always neat." Her words made something inside Samuel relax. Over the next few days, Clara worked hard to settle into the new environment. She cleaned the kitchen, washed clothes, and helped organize small corners of the house that hadn't been tended to in months. Every so often, she glanced at Daniel to include him in little tasks or conversations, but she never pushed him when he seemed hesitant. Daniel, however, didn't know how to behave around her. Part of him liked her gentle voice and calm presence. Another part worried she might grow tired of helping him, like others had in the past. To protect himself, he sometimes acted stubborn, refusing small offers of help or staying quiet when she asked him simple questions. Clara understood his uncertainty. She knew how loss made people build walls. She never scolded him or forced him to open up. Instead, she kept showing quiet kindness, steady, patient, and consistent. One afternoon, Daniel tried to reach a book on a shelf. He leaned too far on his crutch, and it slipped, causing him to lose balance. He didn't fall hard, but he landed on the floor with frustration burning in his eyes. Before Samuel could rush in from the yard, Clara was already beside Daniel, kneeling gently. "Are you hurt?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head but looked away, embarrassed. "I didn't want you to help me." Clara understood the meaning behind his words. She gave him a small smile. "I know. But everyone needs help sometimes. Even grown-ups." He didn't reply, but he didn't pull away when she helped him sit up. She didn't lift him or make him feel small. Instead, she handed him his crutches and let him stand by himself while staying close enough to catch him if he swayed. That little moment changed something inside Daniel. For the first time, he felt seen not as someone who needed pity, not as someone fragile, but as a boy who simply needed understanding. Samuel saw everything from the doorway and felt a mix of gratitude and hope warming his chest. Clara handled Daniel's accidents with grace he had rarely seen from anyone else. As the days passed, Clara introduced small changes to their home life. She created simple routines, morning stretching for Daniel to strengthen his legs, evening reading sessions where each of them took turns reading aloud, and gentle chores Daniel could participate in without feeling overwhelmed. She didn't treat him like he was helpless. She treated him like a child, learning his own strength. Daniel began to look forward to her company. He still had moments of fear. Fear she would leave. Fear she would tire of him. Fear she would change her mind like others had. But each time, Clara stayed patient. She also helped Samuel in ways she didn't expect. She brought a calm energy into the house, easing the tension he carried every day. When meals were cooked and clothes were neatly folded, Samuel realized how much weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He found himself looking forward to coming home. The house felt warmer now, more alive. Still, he kept his feelings hidden, unsure whether Clara would ever see him as more than the man who hired her through letters. He didn't want to rush anything or make her uncomfortable. One evening, the three of them sat at the table after dinner. Daniel was sharing a story about a bird he had seen earlier near the fence. Clara listened with complete attention, smiling whenever he grew excited. When Daniel finished, Clara clapped softly. "That sounds like a brave little bird." "Oh." Daniel grinned, a real grin. One Samuel hadn't seen in months. Samuel watched the two of them, feeling something inside him stir. For the first time, in a long while, he felt like his home was becoming whole again. And though none of them said it aloud, the truth lingered quietly in the air. Something new was growing between them. Something gentle. Something healing. Something hopeful. Life on the ranch slowly began to change after Clara's arrival. The change did not happen all at once. It was small at first. Tiny shifts that were easy to miss unless one looked closely. But little by little, the days started to feel warmer, kinder, and more filled with purpose. Clara brought a steady rhythm into the house. Mornings started with soft humming as she prepared breakfast. The sound floated through the rooms like sunlight spilling through windows. She had a habit of smiling at simple things, the smell of fresh bread, the sight of birds resting on the fence, or the way Daniel's hair stuck up after waking. These gentle moments made the home feel alive in a way it hadn't in years. Daniel noticed the difference too. For the first time, he had someone who paid attention to the quiet details of his day. Someone who remembered which book he liked to read before bed. Someone who encouraged him to try new things, even if they were small and seemed unimportant to others. When he completed a task, she didn't shower him with pity or overpraise. She simply smiled and said, "Well done, Daniel. I knew you could do it." That kind of encouragement made him stand a little taller each time. One of the first major improvements Clara made was creating small exercises to help strengthen Daniel's legs. She had once cared for a neighbor who had also struggled with movement, so she understood that slow and steady practice could make a difference. She never pushed Daniel too hard. Instead, she made the exercises part of their routine, like a quiet game they played together. They practiced stretching by the window, walked short distances with rest breaks, and tried balancing without crutches for a few seconds at a time. At first, Daniel doubted himself. "My legs don't want to listen," he said one morning. When his steps wobbled, Clara gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's all right. Legs learn slowly. We just have to teach them to be brave." Her words stayed with him. And over time, Daniel found himself looking forward to their sessions, eager to see whether he could improve a little each day. Meanwhile, Samuel watched everything with a quiet heart. He didn't always join the exercises, but he was never far away. Sometimes, he pretended to be busy with tools near the window just so he could see how patiently Clara guided his son. Other times, he found himself listening from the next room, feeling a warmth he couldn't fully describe. It wasn't just relief, it was gratitude, admiration, and something else he was almost afraid to name. Clara didn't only care for Daniel, she also helped Samuel more than she realized. She tended to meals and laundry, lightened the workload inside the house, and even helped plan out chores so the ranch ran more smoothly. Samuel found himself able to focus on field work without constantly worrying whether Daniel was safe or lonely. Knowing Clara was with him gave Samuel a sense of peace he hadn't felt since his wife passed away. But more than the help she offered, Samuel appreciated Clara's presence. She listened when he spoke, laughed softly at his small jokes, and never criticized him for the things he struggled to manage alone. She had a way of making conversations feel easy, even on difficult days. He respected her resilience, admired her calm nature, and found comfort in simply being near her. Though they grew closer, there was caution in both their hearts. Samuel didn't want Clara to feel pressured into anything more than the arrangement they had made. Clara, in turn, wondered whether she belonged in a place where people depended on her so deeply. She feared missteps, worried she might disappoint Samuel or fail Daniel in some way. One evening, the ranch workers gathered for supper in the large dining room. They talked cheerfully about cattle, the weather, and small events from the day. Clara cooked a warm meal, and everyone enjoyed it with gratitude. Daniel sat close to Clara, proudly showing the ranch hands how far he could walk with his crutches now. They clapped and encouraged him, making him beam with pride. Samuel watched the scene with a soft smile. The room felt full in a way he hadn't felt in years. People were laughing, Daniel was glowing with confidence, and Clara moved gracefully from place to place, making sure everyone was comfortable. Later that night, after the workers went to their quarters, Samuel and Clara stepped onto the porch to enjoy the quiet. The stars stretched across the sky like scattered pieces of silver, and the cool breeze carried the scent of pine and earth. Neither of them spoke at first. They simply listened to the night. Finally, Samuel said, "Daniel is improving. I see it every day now." Clara nodded gently. "He works very hard. He wants to do well." Samuel looked at her, his expression soft. "It's not just him who has changed. This whole home feels different." Clara lowered her gaze, feeling her cheeks warm. "I'm glad I could help." He hesitated, then added quietly, "You've done more than help. You've given this place life again." Clara didn't know how to answer. Her heart felt full, but she stayed quiet. Neither pushed the conversation further. Sometimes emotions are too delicate to put into words. As time passed, the connection between the three of them deepened naturally. On days when the ranch workers needed extra hands, Clara helped pack lunches or carried fresh water to the fields. She learned the names of all the horses, tended to the garden, and even tried her hand at milking one of the cows, much to everyone's amusement when she struggled at first. Daniel enjoyed showing her the small wonders of the ranch. He pointed out the best spots to watch sunsets, his favorite shady tree, and the hidden path behind the barn where wildflowers grew in the spring. He loved when Clara listened intently, as if every detail he shared was important. She made him feel valued. Then came the day that none of them would forget. Clara's birthday arrived quietly, with no announcement. She didn't expect anyone to know or care. But Daniel had discovered the date after seeing a note she kept tucked inside her sewing basket. With Samuel's help, they prepared a small surprise for her. Samuel carved a delicate wooden flower, and Daniel colored a simple card by hand. During dinner that evening, Clara noticed that both Samuel and Daniel kept exchanging secretive glances. After the meal, Daniel got up slowly and brought the card to her, his face glowing with excitement and pride. "For you," he said shyly. Clara opened it, and tears filled her eyes at the sight of his careful handwriting. Samuel then handed her the wooden flower. "A small gift," he said softly. Clara traced the smooth curves of the carving with amazed fingers. "It's lovely," she whispered, touched more deeply than she expected. But the true surprise came when Daniel stood without his crutches and walked 3 careful steps toward her. He wobbled, but he didn't fall. Clara gasped softly and covered her mouth as tears spilled over. "Look, Clara," Daniel said proudly. "I practiced. For you." Clara knelt down and hugged him gently, careful not to throw him off balance. Her heart felt full, in a way she hadn't felt in years. Samuel watched them, emotion tightening his chest. In that moment, he realized the truth. Clara had done more than fill a space in their home. She had brought them hope. She had given Daniel courage. She had quietly reshaped their lives. And deep inside, Samuel knew he did not want his life or Daniel's to be without her ever again. But neither of them said those words yet. Instead, they simply stood together in the warm light of the kitchen, forming a quiet picture of a family that was beginning to grow, not by blood, but by love, trust, and healing. The months that followed Clara's birthday were some of the happiest the ranch had seen in years. The days passed in a gentle rhythm, filled with small routines and soft moments that slowly began to feel like the pieces of a family coming together. Samuel, Clara, and Daniel each carried their own memories of loss. But somehow, by sharing their days, they all began to heal in ways they never expected. Clara continued to help Daniel with his walking practice. And each week, he grew stronger. He still needed his crutches most of the time, but his confidence had changed completely. Before, he used to fear trying new steps. Now he looked forward to every new challenge, knowing Clara would cheer him on patiently. One cool morning, while the sun was rising over the hills, Daniel walked from his bed to the kitchen door, with only one crutch. Clara's eyes filled with quiet pride as she watched him. "You did that on your own," she said warmly. Daniel grinned. "I wanted to surprise you. You surprise me every day," she replied. Moments like that filled the home with soft warmth. Samuel also found new comfort in the small things Clara brought to their lives. He liked seeing her apron hanging next to his coat on the hook, hearing her laughter when the ranch hands told jokes, and sharing peaceful evenings on the porch while Daniel drew little pictures at the table. The more time Samuel spent around Clara, the more he admired her strength and kindness. She approached life gently, but not weakly. She had endured more loss than many people her age, yet she still chose to care deeply for others. Her presence reminded him that hope could grow again, even after years of silence. Still, Samuel was careful. He never wanted Clara to feel pressured to be more than she wanted to be. The agreement they had made was practical. At first, a woman needed a home, and a father needed help. But the bond that formed between them was something neither had expected, and both were cautious about acknowledging it too soon. Clara, meanwhile, found herself feeling safe on the ranch in a way she hadn't felt safe since her husband's passing. She enjoyed taking care of the home, watching Daniel grow braver, and seeing the quiet pride in Samuel's eyes when the ranch flourished. She admired the honesty in Samuel's character. He never pretended to be more than he was. He worked hard, treated everyone fairly, and carried the weight of fatherhood with steady devotion. Yet Clara wondered if she truly belonged. She worried that she might fail Samuel or disappoint Daniel. She feared getting too close and losing herself to hope again, only to face heartache. But every time she doubted, something gentle happened. Daniel, reaching for her hand, Samuel thanking her sincerely for a small task, or one of the workers telling her the home felt happier with her in it. As spring turned to early summer, Clara realized she wanted to stay. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she felt she had found something precious. It wasn't grand or exciting. It was quiet and steady, something she could trust. One evening, when the sky glowed with soft pink clouds, Samuel and Clara took a walk along the edge of the fields. Daniel rested inside, coloring in a book Clara had given him weeks earlier. The ranch spread out around them, peaceful and open. They walked slowly at first, unsure of where to begin. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat and said, "Clara, these months have meant a great deal to me." Clara looked up, her eyes gentle. "They have meant a great deal to me as well." Samuel took a deep breath. He had practiced the words in his mind for days, but saying them aloud made his voice softer than he expected. "I want to be honest with you. Again. When you came here, I hoped only for help with Daniel, but you became someone far more important than I ever imagined." Clara felt her heart skip. She looked down at her hands, unsure if she should speak. Samuel continued, his voice steady, but filled with feeling. "You changed this home. You changed me. You gave Daniel hope. And you gave me something I thought I wouldn't feel again." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Clara, I care about you, truly. And I want you to stay here not because I need help, but because I want this family to be complete. If you are willing, I would like to marry you, In truth, not just in agreement. The words hung in the air like soft music. Clara's breath trembled slightly. She lifted her eyes to his, seeing sincerity in every line of his face. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She felt the weight of her past and the pull of her future gently touching each other. When she finally found her voice, it was calm and clear. Samuel, I care about you too. More than I expected to feel again. When I came here, I was lost. I didn't know who I was without my old life. But you and Daniel, you gave me a place to belong. Her eyes softened even more as she added, I would be honored to marry you. Samuel exhaled deeply. Relief, washing through him like a warm wave. His eyes grew moist, though he blinked it away with a small smile. Thank you, Clara. You've made me the happiest man. When they returned to the house, Daniel looked up from his drawings. He could sense something had changed. Clara knelt beside him and gently took his hand. Daniel, she said softly, your father and I have decided to become a real family. I will stay here with you. Always. Daniel's eyes widened with wonder. You're really staying? Yes, she whispered, smiling. If you want me to. Daniel didn't hesitate. He threw his arms around her neck, holding her tightly. I want you to stay forever, he said, his voice full of joy. Samuel watched them with a full heart. He had once feared no woman would ever accept Daniel or choose a life on the ranch. But Clara had come with strength, born from hardship, and a heart ready to care again. Their wedding took place quietly under the tall oak tree near the house. The ranch hands stood around happily, and Daniel proudly held the ring. Clara wore a simple dress sewn from fabric she found in the town's general store. Samuel wore his best shirt. When they exchanged vows, the breeze rustled the leaves gently, as if nature itself was blessing the moment. Afterward, they shared a small meal with everyone who worked on the ranch. Laughter filled the air, and Clara felt warm inside. She looked at Samuel and Daniel and realized she had found something far more meaningful than she had ever hoped for a place where love wasn't rushed, where healing came slowly and naturally, and where she was appreciated for exactly who she was. Their days continued peacefully after the wedding. Samuel worked the ranch with a lighter heart. Clara filled the home with softness and warmth. Daniel grew stronger, taking more steps on his own each week. They shared stories at night, worked side by side during the day, and faced challenges together with patience and trust. They were not perfect. They had worries, tired evenings, and moments of doubt. But they faced everything as a family, and that made all the difference. In the end, Clara had thought she was going to the ranch because she had nowhere else to go. But she soon realized she had come to the one place where her heart could truly heal, and Samuel, who once believed no woman would choose a life with him and his son, discovered that love could return in the most unexpected ways. Together, they built a future not out of convenience, but out of real affection, steady trust, and the quiet, powerful love that grows when three hearts finally feel at home.